He walked into the cafe carrying the kind of silence only fighters know, the silence that comes after a war, when the crowd has gone home and the body is still buzzing with invisible bruises. You imagine him, Adrien Broner, stepping off the battlefield of the octagon and into something ordinary. The smell of roasted coffee beans, the hum of voices, the quiet clinking of cups. For a moment, he isn't the fighter, the headline, the spectacle. He is just a man wanting a pause, a sip, a breath away from the weight of eyes that never stop watching him. But here is where the paradox begins. Because when you crave invisibility, the world often grants it in the most brutal way, not as peace, but as disregard. The waiter didn't know his name, didn't see the fighter's scars hidden beneath his clothes, didn't feel the storm of battles, survived pressing into the air around him. To that waiter, he was another body in a chair, another order on the list, another face lost in the blur of the morning rush. And so the hand that placed the cup before him did so with carelessness, as if dignity could be measured in ounces of respect. The gesture wasn't cruel, not directly. It was worse than cruelty. It was dismissal. It was the kind of quiet disrespect that cuts deeper than insults, because it whispers something no man wants to hear. You don't matter here. You feel it, don't you? Because this isn't just his story, it is yours. You've sat in rooms where your name meant nothing, where your work, your struggles, your victories, all of it, collapsed into silence because the person in front of you chose not to see. And it burns. It burns because you know how much you've carried, how many nights you've stayed awake building yourself in the dark, and still, someone can glance at you and reduce you to dust. This was not about coffee, not about a waiter. It was about the invisible currency of respect, about the fragile thread that holds our dignity together in the eyes of the world. You know it, because every human being knows it, the wound of being unseen, the insult of being treated like you are no one. And, as Adrien sat there, the cup trembling slightly against the table, he wasn't just tasting bitterness in the coffee. He was tasting the bitterness of a question that stalks every fighter, every dreamer, every human. Who am I when no one recognizes me? Who am I when respect is denied? That question is where the story begins. Because you've been there too, stripped of your titles, unseen for your efforts, reduced to the shallow judgments of someone who never cared to look deeper. And in that moment, the cafe became more than a cafe. It became a mirror reflecting the raw truth of existence. You can conquer the world, and still, there will be places where you are treated as nothing. But the real war is not in the octagon. The real war begins here, in these quiet, humiliating moments, when the dignity you thought you owned is tested. Do you collapse into bitterness? Or do you learn to stand taller, even in the face of being unseen? He thought fame would be armor. He thought the glow of cameras, the roar of arenas, the name etched in headlines would build an invisible wall around him, one that shielded him from the small humiliations of ordinary life. But in that cafe, the truth revealed itself in the simplest, sharpest way. Fame doesn't always protect you. Because the waiter did not bow to the myth of his victories. The waiter did not hear the echo of crowds in his footsteps. To that man holding a tray, Adrien Broner was not a world-class fighter, not a name carved into the annals of combat. He was just another figure slouched at a table, another request to fulfill, another body to dismiss with a glance. And in that single act, the careless way the tray clattered against the wood, the tone of voice dripping with arrogance. He was stripped of everything fame was supposed to guarantee. You feel it, don't you? That sting of being unseen when you expected to be recognized. That realization that your achievements, no matter how grand, do not always translate into the language of respect. It cuts deeper than a punch because it bypasses the body and pierces the soul. A fist in a ring is a blow you can brace for. Arrogance in a stranger's voice is a wound you never prepared to take. And here lies the contradiction that fame hides so well. People imagine it as a throne, a crown, a shield that elevates you above the common sting of disrespect. But the truth is darker, quieter. Fame is a costume that only works in certain rooms. Step outside the lights, and you are forced to confront the same fragile human need as everyone else, the need to be treated with dignity. No amount of applause can erase it, no number of followers can replace it, no spotlight can protect it. This is the hidden hunger of every fighter, every artist, every human being. You may crave victory, recognition, success, but beneath it all, what you crave is something simpler, more primal. To be seen as worthy, not because of what you've achieved, but because of who you are when no one is watching. That is the paradox Broner tasted in that cafe. Not bitterness in the coffee, but bitterness in the truth that fame could not buy him what he needed most. And so the question grows heavier in you as well. If even fame cannot shield you, what is left to hold on to? For years he had lived in arenas where the air itself seemed electric, where the pounding of his heart blended with the roar of thousands, where the sting of sweat and blood was softened by the knowledge that every eye in the room was fixed on him. In that world, he was not just Adrien Broner. He was the fighter, the spectacle, the man whose very presence bent the energy of the crowd. The lights crowned him, the cameras worshipped him, and in the ring, every blow he gave or took carried meaning. But step into the cafe, and all of that vanished. No spotlights, no chance, no referee keeping order. Just a man sitting alone at a table, facing not a trained opponent, but the subtle cruelty of indifference. A tray slapped down carelessly, a voice dripping with quiet contempt. No punches exchanged, yet the wound was real. The battle had changed, and so had the terrain. This was not about fists or footwork. This was about dignity colliding with disregard in the most ordinary of places. You know this feeling, don't you? The way the world can change shape when the stage is gone. You've lived moments where your strength, your accomplishments, your story, none of it mattered. You were not the hero, not the fighter, not the person who survived storms. You were just another face in the crowd, and the world treated you as such. And in that moment, you realize something that hurt more than failure ever could. The everyday world has its own way of breaking you. Not with grand defeats, but with small humiliations. That is the paradox of being human. You can be larger than life in one room and invisible in the next. You can train your body to endure punishment, but you cannot train your soul not to flinch when respect is denied. The cafe became Broner's quiet crucible, a place where the battle wasn't about domination, but about endurance. Could he withstand this quieter pain, this reminder that no matter how high you rise, you are still vulnerable to the sharp edges of ordinary life? And as you picture him there, staring at a cup that suddenly felt heavier than any championship belt, you realize this is not just a story. It is the universal struggle. The fighter inside you, the one who has endured and conquered, will always meet the everyday world. The one that doesn't care, the one that forgets your name, the one that tests you not with punches, but with disregard. The question is not whether you will face this battle. The question is whether you will let it define you. He could have erupted. He could have let the fighter inside him rise. The same fire that once roared under bright lights. The same hands that carved his name into history. In that moment, silence was not his instinct. Instinct was to strike back, to demand respect in the way the world usually understands it. Through force, through dominance, through confrontation. But he didn't. He sat there, quiet, holding it in. And that silence was louder than any punch he had ever thrown. You know why? Because restraint is its own form of violence. The kind that doesn't break bones, but shatters illusions. The illusion that power is always about reacting, that strength is always about being louder, harsher, more explosive. By not moving, by not answering arrogance with rage, he proved something even he might not have expected, that the deepest power is sometimes invisible. It is not the roar, it is the refusal. You have felt this too. That moment when anger boiled in your chest, when every part of you wanted to respond, to prove yourself, to show the world that you would not be disrespected. And yet, when you chose silence, when you chose composure, the weight of the moment transformed. It was no longer about the other person, it was about you. About whether you would let them dictate the shape of your soul, or whether you would stand taller by not lowering yourself to their level. In that cafe, Broner was not fighting the waiter. He was fighting himself. The part of him that wanted to lash out, the part that wanted to reclaim dignity with fury. But he didn't move. He sat there and let the storm pass. And in doing so, he uncovered a truth that every human must learn. Respect is not something you can demand through intimidation. Real respect is universal. It is owed to every person, not just to champions, not just to the celebrated, not just to those with names that echo through arenas. Respect is the birthright of being human. And here lies the paradox of power. The stronger you are, the easier it becomes to crush, to humiliate, to dominate. But the true test of strength is not whether you can destroy. It is whether you can choose not to. Because anyone can strike when they are insulted, but only the rarest of souls can remain still, knowing they could, but choosing they won't. That is not weakness. That is mastery. You see, the lesson wasn't for the waiter. The lesson was for him. And it is for you. Because life will hand you endless invitations to prove yourself through rage, through reaction, through force. But every time you accept, you give your power away. Every time you resist, you reclaim it. So Broner's silence in that cafe was not defeat. It was proof. Proof that the truest measure of a fighter is not found in the ring, but in the spaces where no one is watching, where the battles are fought quietly, invisibly, against the self. Proof that dignity is not about demanding recognition, but about living in such a way that you do not need it. And now the question turns back to you. How many times have you mistaken anger for power, reaction for strength, noise for presence? How many times have you given your dignity away just to prove a point? What would it mean if, like him, you chose the harder path, the silence, the restraint, the patience that whispers louder than violence ever could? Because here is the truth. Every one of us is fighting in cafes, in offices, in homes, in the unseen corners of life where no cameras shine. Every one of us is asked to prove whether we can hold on to ourselves when dignity is tested. And most will fail. But you don't have to. If this spoke to you, comment, "I choose silence as my strength." Let your words be more than letters on a screen. Let them be your first act of defiance against a world that tells you to react. Because real strength is not in the punch you throw, but in the storm you hold back.